Okay, so hello everyone. Hello everyone, welcome to Big Picture Thinking, an intro to systems thinking how benefits school societies and organizations. So our lovely speaker is none other than Santillan, the founder of School of Deliberate Futures and the lead of Systems Innovation Manila Hub. So she works to reform education to achieve more equitable futures. She's an entrepreneur and educator with interdisciplinary experience across learning development, operation systems, and design. She has a strong interest in applied systems innovation, social justice, and inclusion, particularly in a world threatened by inequity. So she applies all of those different skill sets into School of Deliberate Futures, a Manila-based educational platform reforming critical education and design for justice and liberation. SoDF aims to equip the youth to become a competent workforce, critically conscious citizenry, and future leaders in their communities through educational content and experiences designed to foster meaningful human connections and practice applicable skills. You can find SoDF in Facebook and Instagram. Yes, take it away, Z.
Thank you for the generous introduction, Bianca. And I think it's really great. First, I want to acknowledge all the people I know who's here. And secondly, I might need help, Bianca. I might not see the chat as much. So maybe in the portions where I'll need some conversation, I'll just ask you. So I want to reintroduce myself, maybe for some of you who already know me, or maybe just meeting me for the first time digitally. Today, I'll be talking about big picture thinking, or what really is systems thinking. It's something that I first encountered academically 8 years ago when I was still in university studying sustainability. And it's something very close to heart. A lot of the people here who are attending know that I'm a diver. I'm also a mountaineer. I've lived very close to nature, and that's where I found systems thinking. I was really immediately drawn by its interdisciplinary nature. And today's conversation will go like this. We'll be roughly staying with each other for about an hour. This is a learning session, and I hope to equally learn from all of you who are present here, because I'm sure you all have rich experiences, and the fact that you're curious about systems thinking, being that you're already, you have a lot of care, you might be dabbling into a lot of systems at the moment. Today's conversation will go like this. We'll talk a little bit about wicked problems. Maybe some of you are already familiar with that language. And then we'll talk about what big picture thinking is. And finally, we'll talk about shifting to systems thinking. What are some of the fundamental elements of systems thinking, and how could we practice it in our daily lives? So I hope that today's learning will be rich theoretically as well as the practice of it. So finally, just a couple of disclaimer. We won't be diving into complexity. We won't be diving into feedback loops, emergent theories. Instead, we'll be really looking at systems thinking, why it's relevant and needed, especially during our time. And a couple of notes. I hope this talk will be a conversation. I hope that it's just one side. And how can we do that? If you're here, if you're present, if you are currently in front of your laptop, or if you have this on your phone, I would really appreciate it if you can open your camera so that I can see all of you. And at the same time, you are free to share your thoughts, your feelings, as well as your wisdom through the chat box over here. That would be really appreciated. And finally, thoughts, questions are all welcome in this space. There's no such thing as a dumb question. It can really be anything. I'd really be very happy to answer any of them. And you will be met with kindness and respect on this space. So hopefully we can all do that. So first of all, if you're on your laptop or on your phone, we will be using Mentimeter. So if you're on your laptop, just grab your phone, because I want to get to know all of you first. I want to begin with this question. What's your familiarity with systems thinking? So please go to Mentimeter, www.mentimeter.com. You may scan the QR code in front of you, or you may go to Menti and type the code 86, 83, 12, and 76. And let me just run that now. Let me just fix, this should be the next question. Let me just edit this. All right, so for the meantime, while I'm still fixing Mentimeter, all right, there you go.
Did you give the number again for this, for the Mentimeter? Someone's asking in the chat right now.
It's this one.
All right, thank you for sharing.
There you go. So it's 86831276. Please let us know if you can access it or if you need support. So everyone's welcome here. Either you're just learning this today or you have the hang of it. You've seen this probably before, or you've read some articles about it, or you've been practicing it. All of that is welcome on this space. So we have 5 people in. Let's try to target to have at least 10 here or 15 since we have 24 people in the room. We still have about 30 seconds. I'm seeing that I understand it by theory. So a lot of like people in the middle. Some people already practice it in daily life. That's very, very interesting. Okay, so we have 12 people in. Let's go, everyone. So let's try to have everyone in. So if you're not yet on Menti, we really encourage you so that this could be a conversation between us. All right, so it seems like we have folks in the middle. That means some people who kind of understand it by theory in the middle or average learning about it, and some people already practicing it in daily life. Thank you so much for everyone who joined. So there's gonna be another Mentimeter later, so stay tuned. So we'll talk about wicked problems first. And in this context, I wanna share a story with all of you. So in my younger years, and Pauline is here, Papi is here, people I know, I spent most of my weekends as an undergraduate. So we belong in a community called Loyola Mountaineers. I spent most of my weekends with this community climbing mountains. And that's when we met the Dumagat indigenous people. And then that's when I met more indigenous people along the way as I climbed more mountains and explored more territories. This is one of the photos I took in Benguet province. And one story really struck me. I think I already graduated from university at this point. I met with another Damagat community, an elder, and they told me about they have that one dream. Their dream is to have their child be the first in their family to graduate from high school. You see, his name is Tatang Eteng. Si Tatang Eteng, he told me he only graduated grade 4 during his time. And he was very hopeful because he has 5 kids, that ideally one of his kid would hopefully graduate from high school, because despite working day and night, trying to harvest those crops, really working hard, they remain stifled by land grabbing issues because there were only a few literate members from their community. So every time we're there in the community, they would ask us, they would call me Sheila during the time. So Sheila, patulong, paano ba yung mga ganito? And they would ask us all about law, all about human rights, just to fight for their lands. And this was really eye-opening for me because ironically, these same indigenous people are also our frontliners defending what's left of our forest cover here. They live very close to nature, but at the same time, we can see the interconnection here between inequality, law, environmental protection, and education. They're all really linked together. And it made me realize that there's really no clear division between environmental and social issues. And I found it strange because I spent a lot of my time joining startup competitions and getting into seed grants and funding. And oftentimes these things are not together. It's just environmental protection and then other issues. But oftentimes you can see there's a really strong link between those. And we know that we live in a country that is so abundant with natural resources. In fact, we live in 1 out of 17 mega biodiverse countries, which means that we have majority of our planet's species here in the Philippines, as well as many endemic species that can only be found here, just like the tamarao, if you're fortunate enough to see one, and the Philippine eagle, which you can see in Davao. And in the waters of Verde Island Passage, we are also the epicenter of marine biodiversity. Yet, what's strange is that we're also among the most vulnerable people from climate stability. And we know this, we understand this. We just came from a very, very depressing time during December. It was holiday season, and most of Filipinos there um, are having difficult time in Siargao area. And I'm sure we've all seen the news. And we know that it's going to be always going to be the poorest people from the poorest countries who's going to be affected by environmental change. That includes our country. These environmental problems are also a question of morality. So these are the things that open my eyes, because most people, we can see these statistics in IPCC. Most carbon emissions are from the global north, yet it drastically affects us here in the global south. Representation is another issue. So all of these really, really interlinked, complex problems that we call wicked problems affect us. And it's our reality every day here, living here in the Philippines. Because as we know, beyond climate realities, we're also infamous for so many things. Because, for example, our healthcare affecting education, our quality of education affecting poverty, poverty affecting corruption, and so on and so forth. Then this has been so clear during this pandemic, more than before. And there's so many complex, ever-growing problems that we call, again, wicked problems, and they're very complex. But the thing is, these things could be really overwhelming to think. But now, looking at what's around us, for example, me, I see a laptop, and I see 26, 25 of you here who are connected with me through the power of technology and internet. And I see my notebook here. Things may seem comfortable, right, at this point. Like, where are the wicked problems at? But our reality is really made of unintended consequences. Without and with that, we without systems awareness, we would have more of those unintended consequences. Now I know I talked a lot, but let me try to give you a concrete example. So if you have your device with you, for example, I have my phone, I have my laptop with me, and it's charging right now. This is something that we find ourselves doing every day, right? We charge our devices, we go on Messenger, we talk to friends, we go to social media, we send photos, we send memes. It's all part of our daily lives now. And if you're a student, that's also how you connect to your professors and your classmates. When we charge our phones, we know that electricity is not coming from our socket or from the wall, from our houses. Electricity is actually harvested from electrical grids. And most of our electricity is from burning fossil fuel. So here in the Philippines, almost 45% of our electricity is coming from burning former living things. And without that, without plugging our devices and burning living things, well, our devices might not work. Another example is we don't go to the grocery store, and since there's a pandemic, safer to just stay indoors. We don't go to our online shopping. We don't go to our online apps thinking, okay, I genuinely want to contribute to labor issues. We don't say that. Same thing that when we plug our socket, we don't say, I genuinely want to contribute to climate instability. So we don't do that. Yet if we purchase from companies who treat their workers improperly and we contribute to the demand that allows that system to continue. And these are examples of what we call systems awareness. Being aware that whatever our action is, or even the words that we speak and the thoughts that we think, would have a large effect contributing not just to us, not just to fellow human beings, but the living things and things around us. A nice quote from Albert Einstein: "We can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." And this is so important because today, in 2022 already, right, we have a growing problem in anxiety, depression, mental illness, despite having the technologies that allow us to do this, to reach people who are not even in the country at this moment, beyond the Philippines, hundreds and thousands of kilometers away from us. So today's problem are often a result of yesterday's solution. So we really need a different way of thinking and understanding through systems thinking that we're gonna talk now. So maybe since most of you are already familiar, and I will just there. I want to see the chat so I could see you. This is a conversation. Maybe like in your own words, how would you define systems thinking? Like in your own words. Pwedeng Tagalog. Of course, you may speak in English or Tagalog or a language that's comfortable. I'll give everyone.
Before I share some of those definitions, but Jake said before when you were sharing your intro, a lot of the approaches to environmental problems I see are usually just from a scientific approach, not a lot of developmental or cultural approaches. I like that insight.
That's a great, interesting insight. And I think what's even nice to further that, what do we mean, right, when we say developmental approach, or exactly do we mean by development? Because I find that development is a term that is used depending on what industry you're part of. If you're from the construction industry, maybe development might look different than other people who are saying development, right? So I think that's really nice. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. So for everyone else, you still have about like 30 seconds. You can share, or if you wanna private message me, that's also good, so I can see your answers. So there you go. I see one. Thanks, Francis. So Francis says systems thinking for him is creating a framework. Ooh, like what kind of framework do you think? So you can share your answers. I'll wait for a couple of more for folks who are still typing. I'm curious to see how people understand systems thinking. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. So it could be just anything in your own language. So for example, thinking about interoperability. Can you tell me more about that? This is my first time. What does that mean? So you can type it down, and then from Pauline, it's having an output or end in mind and having a process to get to it. So very interesting mix of words. Process. I'm seeing framework, process, and then thinking holistically. Thea. It's nice to see familiar names and faces here. So weaving different ideas into tangible solution. Pearl is thinking holistically, understanding the interactions. Okay. Macro view of different components. Very, very interesting word choice. Yan,
I
processes.
can explain it through an example too. So for instance, with Web3 technology, it enables interoperability with the use of a wallet. So by using a wallet to log into any website, you don't have to create different login details anymore, like log into Facebook or to Instagram. You need different login details, right? But with Web3 websites, you can just use your wallet. That enables interoperability because no matter what platform you're in, like your data is like carried with you because these systems like connect with each other. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, I get that. Thank you so much for sharing about that, Bianca. I'm also seeing a couple of friends from the Systems Innovation Network. Hi, Arsene. It's nice to see you here. So it seems that we have some people. So Arsene is from Cape Town, right? Africa? Awesome. So we have folks from Cape Town, and Chia, you're all the way in the States, right? So that's nice. So going back here, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. We'll keep this up so that we really have a nice conversation running tonight. And we're gonna try to keep it cozy as well. So let's have just a fun exercise. So this one, really not much. Just guess, what do you think this photo is? It's a close-up photo of something. Yes, okay. So exactly. So hello to my coffee lovers here. So this is coffee. So it's a close-up photo of the one of our favorite drinks here in the Philippines. So now let's zoom out a bit. So this is the photo here. And earlier, right, there were just coffee bubbles, but now here we could see this is a traditional Turkish coffee pot, and that's currently being brewed. So sometimes if we're part of certain organizations, certain societies, maybe a department in a company, if you're already working, we know some things, but maybe it's limited to a department we're part of or a specific silo that we are part of. Not exactly the big picture or everything about our organization or about our company. So if we see an entire picture here, as we can see now, we can clearly see that there's a pot and now it's currently brewing and it's being brewed in a traditional Turkish coffee pot. So stepping back to zoom out on the bigger picture is part of what we call systems thinking. Now, another one, so this time I invite you on our last Mentimeter. What comes to mind? So this time we won't go into the definitions of systems thinking. We'll take a back seat a bit and just really zoom in on the word systems. What comes to mind when you hear the word systems? And we'll go on Mentimeter again. Same link, same as earlier, and I'll go to the next one. There you go. So what comes to mind when you hear the word systems? I'll just toggle the countdown to 30 seconds for this one. All right. So thank you for all who answered. So a framework again, process, order, design, element. I see web, i.e. interconnectivity, working together, different companies, output, and those are all part of system. So let's take a look at that. Let's talk about that. So I want to talk about systems thinking because oftentimes we think about systems thinking or systems as something very technological or something that's a hard language. So it could be computer, framework, process, and all of those things that you mentioned, the web and the space. But I want to approach systems thinking tonight as something different through a story. So if anyone can guess, folks from the Philippines, where this place is, you can type it on chat. So I want to reflect on how I came to systems thinking even before I was able to study it formally or even had the language about it when I joined university 8 years ago. So this story is because my mom is from Palapag. So folks who know that, it's a place in the Philippines in northern Samar. And during my childhood, we often took the bus. It's almost a day long of a trip on a bus. I remember my mom would wake me up like in the morning sunrise because the Mayon volcano is there. Mayon volcano is very famous here in the Philippines. It's very beautiful and it's shaped exactly like this. And I would see all of that in the travel. After almost one day of taking the bus, we would take the Roro. So it's a big, not enormous, but medium-sized ship, I would say. Take the Roro and I would see the landscape of the seas. After that, we'd reach Tacloban, and from Tacloban, it's another 2 hours to get to Palapag. So it's a long trip. But what I love about that, even as a kid, is I saw so many things. It's like National Geographic, but I'm there. It's like having your own TV with you. So in Palapag, I remember as a kid, there were tons of mangrove trees, tons of fisheries. It's just a lot and it's enormous. But growing up, I saw it rapidly change in my eyes. So when I was in high school, I saw there's a new grocery in Palapag and then a Jollibee, the first Jollibee or fast food chain in the area. And then when I was in university, there is a small mall in the area and there were fewer mangrove trees. And it changed so quickly. It's exactly how I saw the first time I went to Boracay in 2005. It was so pristine versus the last time I saw it in 2017 perhaps or 2018. It was so different. Now there are tons of hotels, buildings, and now you see the sand, they're coming less, closer and closer in the shoreline. And seeing this, I saw mangroves disappear. I saw the world change in front of my eyes growing up. Um, I see that we affect things, people affect things. I saw more tourists coming up in my mom's area in Palapag. There were less mangrove trees, more establishments. There were more trash that I saw. And I saw all of this before I learned the formal language of systems modeling, systems dynamics, feedback loops, because it was there happening around us. And I realized that systems thinking is not just a theory, it's not just a scientific theory that we can learn like the scientific method that we learn and memorize and know here, but it's also an innate intelligence that we know here and here, or even in a gut level, because we see things and our interconnectedness is something that we cannot unsee. So, and to go next, it's almost as if we live in a world like a spider web with several many layers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So really systems thinking, it's beyond a scientific practice. It's a way to reflect inward, zooming into ourselves. It's recognizing how did my beliefs and life experience affect the subjectivity I enter in the space and contribute to society and the people around me. And it's also a continuous process of zooming out, um, seeing what is my society, what's my immediate society, what is my country's needs, and beyond that, what is the global things that are happening. Slowly and slowly, really stepping back, um, critically thinking, discerning, challenging our ideas, and consciously shaping the world around us. So that is what systems thinking is. And to see a broader definition, this is something that you could look up maybe after this chat. It's defined by Donella Meadows. And what I love about Donella Meadows' background is, aside from her background in science, we all know she took her PhD, she is an organic farmer. And most of her insights really come from that. It's living closely with nature, um, and doing a lot of scientific research. And she defines system as an interconnected set of elements, mga parte, that's coherently organized in the way that achieves something. So there's a purpose. A system must consist of three kinds of things. So there are elements or the parts, its interconnectedness, and a function and purpose. And if you look at the photo on the right, this is something we might be familiar with. The Philippines has such a familiar culture. We often live with our extended families. A family is an example of a system. There are certain roles there. Who stands as the leaders of the family? What is the relationship between lolo or grandpa and his apos or granddaughters and grandsons or grandkids? And what is the relationship between the siblings in the family? So this is a system, you know, it's very complex because maybe if I ask all of the people here now, there is always suffering in each family, whether it comes in form of tampuan or misunderstandings to bigger things such as abuse or abusive relationships. And if we ask someone who is part of that, did you intend this outcome? Most often than not, they will say no. They want a healthy, loving relationship. But as we know, systems are very complex, and life by nature is very systematic, it's very interconnected, interdependent, and it continuously unfolds in front of us. So a little bit here. We won't spend so much time here. It's a systems 101. So systems can be large or small. It can be, for example, us, we're a system ourselves. All of our organs, our digestive organs, our brain, our hearts, and all of our parts have a purpose. And what is that? It's to help us survive. So even in our trying moments when we're sick, all of these parts of our systems are really working hard to keep us alive. Could also be large, just like the Philippine system, the Philippine government, or corporations, as well as the UNESCO and other global corporations. And systems are continuously changing. There's so many parts to it, and they're usually complex, as mentioned. And what I want to emphasize here is that we belong in these systems. If we can see them, and I love this analogy where if you can see someone who is dipped in water, you can see them being part of the system, then look closely, look uh, look downward, then you can see also that you are dipped in water, and that just means you're part of a system together. It just may not be always seen. So systems take time. Oftentimes we use the language systems change. But when we really say systems change, it takes long time to shift these thinkings, these paradigms. For example, right now, for example, the internet, these took years and years of development to reach this point. So, and here are some benefits of systems thinking. So first is that it really helps us to understand the world we live in. It helps us understand and examine the consequences of our own actions and thoughts, right? Just like plugging our devices or shopping, consuming things on a daily basis. And then second, beyond, it helps us unlock beyond the surface level. So with systems thinking, we try to understand what's underneath it by critically thinking, what's the why here? Why do people still use social media despite there are unreliable news sources, for example? So go deeper, think critically, and beyond the surface level. And then third, it helps us dissolve complex problems. So when we say dissolve, if you notice, the language here is very precise because most of the wicked problems that we have, ranging from corruption to health, education, poverty, these are very huge things that we can only dream of dissolving in our lifetime because the next generation will have it, but it really will be us. And this is linked to number 4. But we have the choice now whether we want to enlarge the wicked problem or help dissolve it by creating long lasting support structures for positive change. So, this part, we will have a very short exercise. Maybe recently, what's a recurring problem that you've encountered? So, a recurring problem, so for example, for me, during my vaccination, my first 2 shots, they were a bit chaotic. So, the lines were, I didn't really understand the lines. And it's been a recurring problem for my first shot, second shot so far. How about you? Thanks, Arsene. Yes, something a little, I'm trying to make it a little bit different than from the C network. So a little bit mix of theory and applicability. So for folks here, so again, you can also just private message me if you want. What's a recurring problem that you encountered recently? Doesn't have to be something big. It can just be something small. Like another one is internet. Folks from Developh PH know this. So I think I see one from Selena. Can't seem to understand how to wear a face mask without fogging my glasses after 2+ years. Oh my gosh, I can relate. So when I wear my glasses, it also fogs. But thanks for that. So it could be those things. So maybe we can all help each other here. Too much work from Althea, hit or miss. So let's see. Misunderstanding. So this is relational from Ian, and then from Francis, being overwhelmed with knowledge. Althea, okay, being exposed to COVID, quarantine, isolation again and again. So thanks so much for those who replied. We wanna initially take one problem, but unfortunately we would need the annotation tool for this. So we would skip it because one tool to unlock the benefit of systems thinking. And this is something that we teach kids. So fun fact, we've taught systems thinking to kids, 5-year-olds to 14-year-olds. So, and they get it. So it's something that innate, actually, the concept of ugnayan, that we're interconnected, interrelated. One framework that we could use is just taking a problem, and how you word the problem is very important. So it has to be clearly defined. So for example, a problem could be getting COVID despite taking the precautionary measures already suggested. And then ask yourself, why does that happen, until you reach 5 why. So this is the most basic framework. It's called the 5 why framework. And this is what kids really enjoy the most as well. It's something also that they find, they're very curious. So for example, for folks here in the education side, I see some of you joined. This is what they love. And kids are very just innately curious by nature. So you can tap on that. The second one, so let's move. Now let's talk about shifting to a systems perspective. Let's dive deeper, and this time I will be using some Philippine concepts. So our scene, everything has translation, so you could definitely try this out also in Cape Town, because what I find is, despite the West having all these published materials from the 90s, I find that we all have our own words and understanding of what systems is and what systems thinking is. So the first one is, I love this Filipino word. It's called ugnayan. So ugnayan is seeing in interconnectedness. And there's this song, hindi ako makanta. So, but maybe some people here know yung ang lahat ng bagay ay magkaugnay. Magkaugnay ang lahat, lupa, so soil, earth, water, everything is connected. So that's the beauty of the song. It's so wonderful. It's an old Filipino song and really talks about how we're all interconnected. And one of the things we do this is, from thinking of piecemeal thinking or thinking by parts, we want to shift that thinking. So now we're talking about shifting mindsets at this point in the talk to thinking holistically. So when we say we're thinking holistically, we're already concerning ourselves not just of parts, but as a whole. So let me give you an example so that we could see this. In language, in Filipino, our first person is ako, me, ikaw, you. So that is seeing in black and white, me, you, and we can transform that into something holistic that is more inclusive by using the words tayo, or we have a word for it, kapwa. So kapwa is community centric. It looks at it in a holistic way. And for another example, instead of, let's look at an environmental problem. So instead of looking at plastic straws and condemning them when we look at the waste problem. So in that way, if we're condemning just the single-use plastic straws, we're approaching it by piecemeal thinking. If we transform that and look at it in a holistic thinking, let's check what are the habits of people who consume a lot of single plastic use. What are the mindsets that are part of this? What are the policies that maybe make people use this a little bit more? Or on the other hand, what are the policies that help reduce it? And what are the relationships that enable mass single plastic use consumption? So that's just an example of how you might approach that problem from piecemeal thinking, or just looking at straw problem and seeing things black and white. It's like saying, if you use straw, if you're a bad person. That's piecemeal thinking approach versus holistic thinking. So for example, fun facts, straws are very helpful in healthcare systems, especially for people who have health problems. It might be very difficult to drink or chew, so straws are used. So something like that, approaching it holistically. Second shift to think of systems thinking is the word kabuoan. So this is a Filipino word that looks at a wholeness, kabuoan ng tao, wholeness of the person. We want to shift from linear thinking, or, for example, if X, then Y, to something non-linear. So let's have an example. Linear thinking is if problem exists, then solution. Let's think of another environmental problem, say destruction of forest. So if we have a destruction of forest, then we host a planting program. That's linear thinking. How do we transform that into non-linear thinking? So for example, if we approach it like that, like if we have a reforestation problem, or if we have forest destruction, then we host planting program. What is the unintended outcome here? What might happen? Any thoughts? Or actually, Arsim, do you want to try this out since you've done the training already? You want to share your voice with us? All right. Okay. No worries. You might have some internet issues. Or is that me? So I see one answer in the chat. So Jake says, invasive tree species. That is correct. That's one of the outcomes that might happen. So thanks, Jake. So aside from that, if we think about linear thinking, we often lead to band-aid solutions. And band-aid solutions would be, if there's a deforestation problem, we post a planting program, what's going to happen next? How will that be in the long run? So for example, when we plant, we nurture seedlings, who's going to be eligible to take care of that? Who is eligible to harvest if there are any crops there? What is the impact of planting native versus non-native seedlings? Plant and go, exactly what Thea said. So those are some of the things. So we want to see in their wholeness, or kabuuan. And if you notice, in systems thinking, it's very critical to approach things by asking questions. So asking questions is very good. And here is the whole canvas of systems thinking. And you can check this out. It's an open source library over at Systems Innovation Network, where I'm part of, as well as some friends here. So if you notice, things are really dynamic. There you see arrows here. Everything really changes. Like how our relationship with ourselves, one day we're mad and furious to ourselves, and the next day we want to love ourselves a little bit more. So it's that complex. It changes all the time. We're all interconnected, and things are holistic. So this is a canvas that you might want to use in your organization. If you have any thoughts here, you can message me after this talk. But we'll now go to another example of systems intelligence here in the Philippines, in our country. So this is very famous. So these are some of our rice terraces. No worries are seen. That's completely fine. These are rice terraces. They've been around very long. And if we see, this is the system around rice terraces. You can see that it's economically caring. It supports livelihood. It produces quality rice. It's environmentally caring. It really contributes to the growth and conservation of biodiversity. It's very good for the soil, if we put it that way. And it's also socially caring for the people there. What does that mean? It supports their communal rituals of caring each other as well as the environment they live in. And it also serves as a rainwater filtration in their community and all of that. So you can see here that it's a very holistic approach, and we look at it from different perspectives, economically, environmentally, and socially. And this would be the last framework that I'm going to introduce today before we go into some Q&As. And maybe I can answer some of the questions, burning questions or curiosities that you have in taking systems thinking in your work or maybe personal life. So this is called the STEEP framework. If you notice, the background is a traffic problem because we'll try this exercise for just a few minutes, just in the chat box, just so we could spend some thinking time. So the first one is social. What are some of the social elements that contribute to the traffic problem here in Metro Manila? So fun fact, or maybe not so fun fact, Metro Manila is one of the mega cities that has a really large problem in traffic, especially pre-pandemic, and it's still a problem at this point. That's usually the view. So that's one of our major roads called EDSA, and that is usually the view. And oftentimes, if it's nighttime, you see red lights all over EDSA. So we're going to be talking about this problem. So what are the social factors, behavior, cultural norms in the Philippines that maybe possibly contribute to traffic? And at this point, since we don't have annotation, you can just type your thoughts in the chat box. So again, you are really free. There's no right or wrong answer. The beauty of this exercise is really just trying to flex our thinking skills and contributing and see how might we put these factors together. Next, what are some of the technological structures that are present or maybe not present that may enable this to happen? Third, the double E. So what are the economic and environmental structures present or maybe not present that are affecting the traffic problem? And then finally, for P, what are the political structures that are affecting our traffic issue here in the Philippines? So political structures, these are laws, rules, and power dynamics that's present in the country. So I will be spending 1 minute. So I will just play some soft music. I at this point I really want to encourage everyone, try to take one. So either S, T, one of the E's or P, and then try to jot your notes. If you're feeling, if your brain is supercharged right now and feeling powerful, you can try all, and I'll give about a minute for this. All right, I'm seeing a couple of very interesting answers. For folks who want to join the conversation, there's still roughly about 15 seconds. try to read some of the answers as well. Filipino time. So for context, for people joining us outside the country, Filipino time, unfortunately, this is a norm where if the meeting starts, for example, at 8 p.m., people would often arrive a little bit late. People often arrive late. It's called Filipino time. Um, Francis says too many private vehicles, right? Pearl says car-centric policies or infrastructure. So that's from the letter P. Thea says the density of people, definitely. We have a very high population here in Metro Manila. Car-centered transportation system, poor public transportation options, traditional workforces not adapting to work from home. Wow, that is very holistic. Thank you so much. Papi Ian says too hot to commute. So that's another thing. You live in a tropical country, much more comfortable to drive in my car. Easy to break traffic rules when bribing is a norm. So unfortunately, that's part of it. Fear of COVID transmission. Mark says lack of structures to provide accessible ways to commute, such as walking or cycling. Lack of carpooling policies, which is probably rooted from the hazards in the area. Okay. No standard fixed schedule for bus and jeep. Yes. And Maggie says social nature of work that does not permit them. Pauline says lack of proper transportation. Okay. And the price. So thank you so much. I got a message here. I think my dad's here. So okay, hi pa. I don't know you're watching. But yes, all of those factors contribute. And what's good is if we approach it and imagine this is just one problem. You could approach several issues that you find recurring in your organization, in your country. So one of the things I suggest when it comes to my students who are approaching systems thinking for the first time is to look at a community problem or a personal problem. So for example, if you really want to change a habit, you want to learn more, you want to lose weight, you want to save money, you can approach it like this. What are the factors externally contributing to this, and what are the factors internally? And try to see it like that, because you might taking a holistic step makes you also appreciate what's already there. So there's a semblance of appreciation after you look at this from this perspective. Thank you so much for that activity. We'll wrap up now. I want to end with talking about systems mindset, because when I designed this workshop, I wanted to be something meaningful for people to learn from and to find something here that you might not find immediately when you Google it. Because I know, right? We live in such an information digital age that you can just Google everything. But this is something that I've learned learning from systems practitioners and those who create system structures. And this is called the systems mindset. So systems mindset is first thinking critically. So it's looking beyond the surface and then identifying root cause. So thinking critically has a lot of dimensions to it, but a part of it is strongly with curiosity. If you're curious to learn more, if you're curious about the structures around you, then you can take that and then from that learn the structures to ask those important questions such as why is this happening, how might I be contributing to this problem. So that's all for thinking critically. Second is connecting the dots. So again, we in psychology, we have a lot of biases that includes our bias towards ourselves. So connecting the dots is integrating all of it from within and outside us using systems thinking and recognizing and seeing how we are part of the problem. Sometimes we might not always see it, but we are contributing to something, just like, right, the plugging example or the labor issue example earlier. It may not be in our intention to contribute to a problem, but if we think about it in a systems thinking way, then we could really sharpen our systems intelligence. Third is to collaborate. strive for better worlds by working together. This means approaching people from different backgrounds, diverse perspectives, maybe people who belong in a different niche or people who hold different beliefs from you. That's really going to help enlarge that system's awareness. And finally, is to work for the good of all. So, as we know in systems thinking, if there's anything that I want to wrap this up with, systems thinking is not just human beings. One of the reasons why we have all these wicked problems is we are a niche, we are a species why are we acting like we need the entire world to work for us? And it's one of those things that we have to ask ourselves again and again, for if we design something, if we create something, if we take a look at policies, if you're already holding a leadership position or a managerial role, it's something that how might I work for the benefit of more people? Who are the people I'm not thinking of? Who are the people I might be missing? And how might I hold their voices? How might I get to know them? Who are the people that I'm focused on because I belong in their community? And who are the perspectives that I'm missing out so that we can all work for greater equity? So I know we started with many stories and I want to end with a final one. So I mentioned that I used to teach systems thinking to kids. So we call it our missions. These are project-based programs where we teach sustainability to kids in a very fun way. Of course, we don't call it systems thinking. We don't call it sustainability. We don't call it feedback loops or emergence, but we teach it them in a fun way, and we call it kid legends, how to save planet Earth. It's catchy, right? So kids love it. And I was so surprised in my experience that I taught kindergarten preparatory students. There's 6 year olds, and we're talking about plastics. I was so surprised one day. One of my students was crying after seeing the Pawikan video with the straw. So I think most of you know that it went viral a few years back. And eventually, these kids were telling me, I never want to use plastic again. What can I do? So I think that's one of the things that really, really inspires me as someone who advocates for systems thinking, that it doesn't have to be very challenging to understand. There will always be a way to teach it or to learn it in a way because it's something that we know. It's something that's inherent to us. And I will always come back in our ability to care as human beings, and to connect with others, whether it's people, living, non-living things. For example, I have a very strong connection with the sky. It's a non-living being, but there's a connection right there. And empathize with others, that makes each of us natural systems thinkers, who can see our relationships, roles, interconnections, and the dynamics that we live in. So to make that a little bit tangible, imagine the last time you heard a baby cry, or you see that really poor kitten on the street, or you see that dog over there. What's our instinct? Our instinct is to respond with care. So if we come together and harness that collective care as a community, then we can do things that we can't do on our own. And as much as these wicked problems are so overwhelming sometimes, I totally get that. Like when I read the last COP26 report, my heart broke so much. But as Margaret says, there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. So I hope that by attending this talk, by our collective, the collective people here, we can slowly shift to a kinder paradigm. Thank you so much. I'll now open the floor. So I know we extended a little bit on time, but I will end here with a thanks. So let's keep this conversation. I believe all of the people here who joined really care a lot. So I think that's already a huge step. So we can really cultivate the connections that we have here. We have a hub. So we have a systems innovation hub. It's a hub for learning. So you can join that. That's free. We host workshops and talks just like these. Workshops are more hands-on. So if you like hands-on learning, if you like having some friends along the way, you can definitely join us. So for folks who have to go, thank you so much for joining us. And for people who want to stay and ask questions, I'm here. Thank you so much for listening. Those are my contacts, so you can reach me via LinkedIn, or you can join the Manila Hub to just get in touch. It's a global community, so you won't meet just Filipinos, but of course everyone. We really need that more collaboration these days and understanding. Arsene, thank you so much. Thea, thank you so much. Thanks, Elle. So I'm gonna open now the floor for any questions. Time for me to listen to all of you.
Going to send what I sent in the chat. If you want to send it in our poll, just head to the link here. You can just send it in the chat. I can read it there also. But while we're waiting for, oh, there is a question. How do you nudge your organization to implement systems thinking? That's our first question.
Right. This is from?
It's anonymous, yes.
All right. So how do we nudge our organization to think of systems thinking? My short answer there is looking at your leadership structures, because leadership structures have the big picture eyes often. They have the eyes when it comes to what the policy is, what your role is, your organization's role, what your personal role is, and what's theirs. So if you have a way to nudge a person in leadership, if you have a way to maybe send them an email or talk to them about your concerns and this movement towards systems thinking, then I think that could be definitely the start.
Can you give an example of maybe you were part of an organization before we had to introduce to some very new concepts to a lot of newbies?
Yes. So to give an example, in the education community, systems thinking might feel very invasive. It's all this like, it may feel something external or more like an invasive species. It reminds me of tilapia for some reason. So it might feel like that. And you need to find a common language between you and the community that you want to serve, or in that question, between you and the organization that you're part of, to see why does this matter. And what I find personally when we try to bring systems thinking in our organization, because one of the challenges that we have, if we introduce systems thinking and parents don't understand why it's important, then we wouldn't have the revenue to keep doing these programs, right? So that was our challenge. But how we approach this is to find common value to parents. And what we found was talking in values, or saying that this will improve your child's critical thinking skills, which are highly valuable in learning, works. But if we say we need to learn systems thinking, what's that? It doesn't connect to people. So I personally find that if we speak largely in values and finding common ground, then that's definitely like a step closer to your goal. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. That was I love that example. And I really loved how that showed in your presentation as well. Not only was it theoretical, it was also very practical. So we were able to like understand such a concept more clearly. Question from me. I guess I'd love to know how you first got into systems thinking, especially like as a Filipino.
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting. So I really found about systems thinking because of love. As cheesy as it sounds, I love the environment so much. And it really broke my heart. So it's a combination of love and heartbreak, because it really broke my heart seeing, because I dive, so I usually dive when my dad is here. We dive a lot. So it's been part of my childhood, seeing coral, seeing these things, seeing the mountains, and all of a sudden I see them again and they're bleached, they're gone. And then I learned that they're gonna be gone in a couple of years if we don't take care of them. So I've been really looking for ways on how might I learn about sustainability. And like a fresh batch of a four club. I was lucky, I guess, because before I graduated, my school implemented the sustainability minor program. Without hesitation, I took it. I learned about systems thinking, systems modeling. So one of my project was modeling for dugongs or sea cows in the Philippines into helping them increase their vulnerable population. So that was one of my projects and I really enjoyed it. It was very practical. We had fish simulations on how we might increase fish production. So that's how I got into systems thinking. But it's an evolving thing here. It's popular, I find, in social enterprises. So I'm also an entrepreneur. So the buzzword is kicking a lot there. Systems thinking. How do we move from short A to band-aid solution to long-term thinking? And that's eventually how I got into education. So it's those interlinked small details about my life kind of just led me there.
That's lovely. Thank you. And connected to your Filipino experience, actually, next question is, how's your experience as a Filipino in the global community of promoting technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship?
Sorry, what was that? The question
I will
was.
copy paste it here again so that you can see, but I'll read it again also. How's your experience as a Filipino specifically, in the global community of promoting technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship? Because your work is pretty interdisciplinary. That's why I think combine all these fields,
Right,
especially since
right.
you're part of SI. Yeah,
Yeah.
global.
So to the question you asked about this, let me know about my experience that you're particularly curious about. I'll share something kind of broad, and then if you can share something specific, I'll be happy to answer that. Um, Promoting technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Wow, like this was like 8 years ago. So my experience was here in the Philippines, we are home to many problems. A lot of them I personally want to solve. For example, like human rights violations here so high. Human trafficking is such a huge problem. We have a lot of environmental issues. Uh, so as a part of a global community promoting technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship, I learned one of my learnings was yes, we have a lot of challenges here. Yes, we have a lot of wicked problems, but those all contribute to having an innovation mindset. So, what does that mean? When you have less constraints, you have to innovate to survive. And this is something I've learned being part of the global community because I remember that we would talk about problems and I would share about our problems saying, 6 people just died because they don't have water to drink. That's a reality here. We still live in a time where we're very, very vulnerable. And that's the best word I could describe it as a Filipino. And the global community is looking at us. How have you been surviving the past years? We don't have policies about this yet. We're not yet fast enough. We're always moving and evolving and continuously improving these things. So how have you been doing it? So I found that if I look back at my roots, at my community, there's so much innate intelligence there. It's just not published. Just like how we have rice terraces, I think that's amazing. Our architecture, kubo, is really great. It's like environmentally great. It's good for the community. The way it's designed is, and there are a lot of things. Maybe an architecture graduate would be better, but I watched this TED talk about an architecture firm sharing how our indigenous architecture is actually very good for the environment. So I found that looking inward, we can contribute so much as well in the global community. We may not have the publications because those are not our strengths, but we already have our history. We just have to go back, learn from it, and then give it back. I hope that answered it. But if you have any more specific question, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Very touching. And actually, this next question is very connected to this. How do you document systems thinking? Like, do you make a spreadsheet, write them all down? How do you do content management on an ever-growing complex system?
So with systems thinking, I think I'll go back to a concrete example. When we think about the time you learned how to write and read, so often we were taught to read from left to right if you're from this country. And at the same time, we were taught to take down notes as well, the same way from left to right. We spent many years, at least like in my generation. I'm not sure if it changed over time, but I think it's still the same. We were taught capital letter, small letter, left to right, copy. And that's how largely we took our notes. I want to connect this with this question because when we're thinking about documenting systems thinking, we have to shift our thinking also from linear to something more holistic. So, for example, there's one study that shows that if we use webs in our notes, it makes we can remember or recall our notes more. So, the web approach, so it's writing your notes with one idea in the middle and then connecting whatever you think of. So, for example, if you're thinking about sustainability, and then writing your notes like a web, you have the ability to remember it a little bit more than when you write it linear. The same way, when you record something, when it comes to systems thinking, we can't do a linear approach. There are already, the good news, there are already a lot of technology that enables more systems thinking kind of documentation. We use Miraboard a lot. So for folks who are familiar with it, or Jamboard, it really enables you to just really go wild on your canvas into systems thinking, and then take that, print that, put it on a PDF. Usually we use just blocks to group things together so it's still organized, and then we document that. That's good. But if we follow it on, for example, Word format, it's very hard. It's doable, it's possible, but it would take time. So I find, personally speaking, I find that working on canvases, blank things, post-its. But if you want to veer away from papers, you can also do it digitally via boards, Miraboard, Figma, Figma, Jamboard, and a lot of more boards out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all those. As someone in UX, I feel like choosing the software, it's like a matter of OMG, which one will be the easiest to onboard people on. Because what you assume is easy will be like, it's hard to like some people. Uh, I had to do a lot of like unlearning when I realized that not everyone is as tech savvy as
Right.
me. Yeah.
I see one question with me here. I can read it.
Yeah.
Yes, Miraboard is pretty good. I see one question here. I can read it. I think our country lacks the proper foundation for our technology and economy to flourish. I want to do something about it. Where could I start? Should I acquire knowledge in university first? Should I build an organization for this? First of all, to the person who wrote this to me, I appreciate I really feel the care just from your question. Like it's there. And I think, that's already the foundation of doing systems work. If it's something that you feel strongly about, then there's a high chance that if you pursue it in the long run, it's going to be a lot beneficial to you. So how do you approach this? So one of the things that I learned from my mentor, you could approach this when you want to learn something. Personally speaking, I did not study education personally, but I'm in education. So that's one of those budding things in my head. Like, should I study education again? Should I go back to university and maybe re-study education? But I found that there are two things. First, never dismiss your experience. If you have experience, in my case, I taught for 5 years, or in your case, if do you have experience building in technology or in economy that you already have, then that is something. Experience is very valuable. Second, just to aid your decision process. Number two, don't forget the hours that you spend on learning via books. So I know that most of the things, if you read online, for example, they will point you out, find a mentor. Mentors are great. They will help you carve your path. But that doesn't work for everyone. If you're fortunate enough to find a mentor, I think that's a really amazing. But know that you can always find mentors even in books or even in people that you learn from online. If you find that there's a strong fit between your values, your ideals, your your vision for the future to someone, study them closely, because that's going to help you out in your decision making. Because acquiring knowledge in university, if it's accessible to you, and if it's something that you see yourself doing or you really want to take in a much deeper learning, you can go to that direction. But know that there are pros and cons to it. Cons is it will take you more time. It will take you, if you want to take masters, it will take you 1 year. If you want to take another degree, it will take you 4 years or so. Or if that desire to change something is already there and you want to start doing more action, then you can do the action. So you can look inward. What are the things that you really value the most? Because that will help you craft those decisions. If you value knowledge acquisition, then maybe being part of the academe and learning again is good. If you value action, um, if you value more community, if you value helping out people in their problems, you don't need a degree for that. And the good news is you could already look at some profiles who have done it. So you could look at profiles of entrepreneurs. And to leave you something concretely, if where should you start, the best way to find an organization that's a match for you. How do you find that? If you find someone na parang, I can be friends with this person, I can see myself being a mentee of this person, don't let go of that. Message them on LinkedIn, find ways, and that's already a start. There are already competitions, so final. There's also competitions around, sobrang dami. Competitions on how we solve problems. You can look at competitions that look at the long term, that can give you funding. So there are a lot of opportunities for that. So you can take a look at those. If you want to see a more concrete list, I could give you some, because I'm connected with some organizations who do those. So yeah, you can message me. I hope that answered your question. Please leave me a message if I did.
That is lovely. Thank you so much. We'll have to wrap up today, but thank you everyone for going. Again, if you have any more questions for Z or you want like some personal systems with mentorship from her, I'm sure she'd be happy to help. Just reach out to her on LinkedIn, and don't forget to, we have even more exciting programming coming up for Developh in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. Please join our Discord or subscribe to us on Substack, check out our website, or support us if you can. Thank you so much. Have a great night or day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.